Welcome to my channel, and enjoy watching. She was just a small-town hairdresser, or so everyone thought. 3 years undercover, Rosa Lane cut hair by day and waited for the right moment to unleash the skills that made her one of the deadliest operatives alive. People thought I was just the woman who cut hair. Every morning in the base shop, I stood with my scissors ready, light chatter filling the space, weekend stories, calls with families, sports scores. To them, I was Rosa Lane, the 33-year-old stylist with a cropped chestnut bob and eyes that seemed to notice everything but say nothing. For 3 years, I worked as the resident stylist at Fort Granite, a remote U.S. outpost buried in the jagged mountains of northern Afghanistan. My little salon was a strange oasis, fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl chairs, a faint smell of aftershave that never went away. Soldiers liked it there because it felt almost normal. I knew them all. Fresh-faced privates lining up for their first deployment cuts. Sergeants keeping sharp for regulations. Officers prepping for promotion photos. I remembered their names, asked about their kids, and made them feel human for the 30 minutes they sat in my chair. "Morning, Rosa," Sergeant Eli Warren said one Tuesday, sliding into the chair at 0800 sharp. "Quick trim?" I asked, already wrapping the cape around his shoulders. "Yeah, got a call with my boy tonight. He's 9 now." I smiled. 9? He was just 7 when you got here. He'll be taller than you before long. While my hands moved with practiced ease, the door opened again. 4 men walked in, full kit, faces weathered by weeks in the field. Everyone else at the base gave them space. "Room for the dream team?" Lieutenant Jonah Briggs asked, his grin faint beneath exhaustion. He led Bravo Squad, one of the most decorated SEAL units in the region. "For you?" "Always," I replied. 15 minutes to finish, Eli, then you're mine. They were my favorite clients, not because of their status, but because they treated me like one of them. They told stories, joked, asked my opinion like it mattered. What they didn't know was I studied every word, every habit, every briefing they casually mentioned. Not because I was nosy, because the instincts of another life never really left me. "You heading out again tonight?" I asked Jonah as I lined up his cut. "Just recon. Nothing big." "Stay safe," I said. My tone sounded casual, but I meant it. That was the last time I spoke to them before everything changed. At 0241 hours, the alarms ripped me out of sleep. Before my mind even caught up, my body was moving, boots on, gear bag open, instincts firing like old circuits reconnecting. The base outside my door was chaos. Officers sprinting, radios crackling, the air heavy with bad news. I slipped into the command post. Nobody questioned me, just the hairdresser passing through. But I caught every word. "Bravo Squad is down," a drone operator reported, voice strained. "Ambush 40 clicks northeast. Pinned under heavy fire. Enemy strength, 50 fighters. Well armed. Dug in." The words sank like ice. 4 against 50. Those weren't odds. They were a death sentence. Colonel Maddox demanded options. Airstrikes would kill the hostages. Extraction required 100 troops and 6 hours to mobilize. They had 4. Sunrise meant execution. The intel officer muttered, "They're already dead. We just haven't said it yet." I kept my face calm, the same mask I wore while trimming hair. But inside, something shifted. The mask was done. I left quietly, returning to my quarters. Behind the closet panel I swore I'd never touch again. The truth waited. Tactical gear, suppressed rifle, blades, comms rig, and an ID with the name I had buried. Captain Rosa Lane Carter, Special Activities Division, CIA. The stylist was over. The operator was awake again. The weight of my old kit settled against me like an old truth I couldn't outrun. The suppressed rifle slipped into my hands with the same familiarity as scissors. Every strap, every buckle, every magazine. I moved through the ritual without hesitation. 3 years of pretending hadn't dulled the motions. But leaving Fort Granite wasn't simple. I couldn't just vanish without a trace. If anyone noticed me slipping past the wire, they'd drag me back before I got 2 kilometers. I needed to move like smoke. Unnoticed, unremarkable, gone before anyone knew I'd left. I packed everything into a plain duffel, threw a hoodie over my vest, and walked calmly through the shadows of the base. I knew guard rotations, camera arcs, and where the blind spots lay. People thought I was just the woman who cut their hair. None of them realized I had mapped this place like a battlefield since the day I arrived. 20 minutes later, I was past the wire and into the mountains. The terrain was savage, jagged rocks, knife-edged ridges, paths that could snap an ankle in one misstep. I ran, not a jog. A brutal, relentless pace drilled into me years ago for nights exactly like this. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't care. For men's lives rode on every step, even if they didn't know it. The distance was 40 clicks, normally a 10-hour march. I cut it in half, forcing my body to remember what it used to be capable of. By the time the first gray wash of pre-dawn touched the ridgelines, I was there. I dropped to my belly and slid behind a slab of rock overlooking the valley. Through my scope, the scene snapped into focus. The seals were bound at the center, bloodied but alive. Around them, a layered perimeter, fighters with rifles, heavy guns dug in, radios, overlapping fields of fire. Not amateurs. These men knew their craft. I counted. Not 50. 52. Intel had missed 2. That mattered. 2 was enough to tip plans into failure. Their commander stood near the captives, glancing at his watch. Sunrise closing in. Execution time. I considered a distraction, a gap for the SEALs to run. But these men were too disciplined. Any break would mean the captives executed on the spot. No, this had to be something faster, cleaner, deadlier. So I did what I was built to do. I made a list. First target, commander. Second, the heavy gunners. Third, the radio men. Then the perimeter guards. 23 shots in under 90 seconds. On paper, impossible. But impossible was my old specialty. I slowed my breathing. My pulse sank into that calm rhythm most shooters never learn. My finger rested light on the trigger. The commander raised his hand to signal the execution. I fired. The shot whispered into the dawn, and the man fell before his arm hit the air. And just like that, the storm began. The first shot smelled of nerve and winter air, muted by the suppressor, swallowed by the rocks. It landed where I wanted. The commander's head snapped, then slackened. For a breath, I watched the ripple through the enemy line like a struck wire. I had planned the sequence in my head 100 times on quiet nights. In the real moment, the math tightened and simplified, one target at a time. Each hit timed to break communication and morale instead of simply killing. Dead enemies are one thing. Crippled coordination is another. You take out the radios, the heavy guns, the officers who understand the big picture, and the rest becomes disorder. I burned through the first cluster almost mechanically. 2 shots to a radio man, 1 to a crew-served machine gunner, another to the fighter who raised his head too high. 90 seconds and 23 confirmations later, the enemy didn't know where the thunder had come from. They only knew the horizon had turned traitor. But 23 wasn't the end, it was the opening. I watched their ropes of command fray. Fighters orbited like confused dogs, scanning and calling, then firing into the smoke without aim. That's when I moved. I shifted position, sliding down a couloir like a shadow. The HDR-47 stock bit into my shoulder as I redeployed. Up close, I was a ghost stalking 2-legged targets through white bloom smoke and panic. I'd brought more than a rifle, flashbangs, smoke, and the little black jammer I'd refused to throw away 3 years ago when I decided quiet life was possible. It chirped once, then swallowed radios in a 2-kilometer bubble. No calls for reinforcements. No coordinated orders. Nothing but human noise. The smoke was my cloak. I went through the haze like a surgeon, quick, efficient, necessary. A cluster of guards stuck to the outer ring, confused. One lunged, and my blade found the seam in his vest. I moved like someone who had rehearsed saving people in the dark until the movement was muscle, not thought. 2 more fell before the others realized they were under real attack. Inside the chaos, the 4 captives watched with the professional calm of men who have tasted death too often to panic at its shadow. Hurt, yes. Angry, yes. But controlled. When I kicked a fallen fighter's rifle away and snapped the metal cutters to the captive's bonds, they didn't recoil. They slotted into action like they'd rehearsed with me the day I'd walked in to cut their hair. "Who are you?" Jonah Briggs asked before he handed a rifle to Eli. "Names later," I said. I had no time for identity. I checked their wounds. Most were bruises and lacerations. Nothing fatal, though one had a hairline fracture near the wrist. I moved like a medic used to patching people under fire. even if I hadn't been assigned that role in years. We moved as one, exiting through the West Pass I'd scouted on my map. Bullets stitched the air behind us. Shouts chased our steps. The SEALs covered while I reoriented our exit strategy. They moved with a fluid precision I admired. Suppression, bounding, covering fire, skills I had watched and logged for months. At the edge of the treeline, Luis Ramirez turned and barked a laugh that tasted of adrenaline and disbelief. "Lady, you just vaporized half their force. Who the hell are you?" I'd expected that question eventually. For months, I'd hidden the answer behind a comb and small talk. Now it didn't matter. "Someone who can't stand watching good people die," I said. My voice sounded stranger to my own ears than I would like. By the time we crested the rise, the valley behind us was a chaos of smoke and retreat. We had minutes before the enemy reorganized. We ran until the world blurred and my lungs burned with a new kind of exhaustion. Not the training kind, but the settling kind, where you realize what you've done and that you might have to explain it later. When we finally stopped, under a sky lightening to dawn, Jonah looked at me in a way people only do after they've seen the impossible with their own two eyes. "You okay to walk?" he asked. I flexed my fingers, feeling the old calluses return like old friends. "Yeah, for now." He glanced at the rifle slung across my back, then at the stub of silver hair peeking from beneath my hood. Around us, the men exhaled, allowed themselves small human noises, laughs that broke into coughs, curses that turned into thanks. The rescue had been surgical and silent, and now that it was done, the truth would start to leak like dye in water. "You saved us," Mark Dalton said softly. "You saved us all." I wanted to say I hadn't come back to be a savior. I wanted to say I preferred fades and friendly chatter. Instead, I wiped my hands on my pants and kept moving. The mountain smelled like dust and the promise of more trouble. For the moment, though, for men were alive because someone had chosen not to be ordinary. We had to get them back to the base. We had to get inside the command tent and watch faces that had written us off learn the truth. And I had a feeling the morning would be long. By the time the gates of Fort Granite came into view, the sun had fully broken over the ridges. Golden light spilled across the compound, washing the base in a calm it hadn't earned. To the guards on the wire, it must have looked like a miracle. For SEALs marching back from the dead, battered but alive. And me, in gear no hairdresser should own, walking beside them. The gate's sergeant's jaw dropped. "Impossible," he whispered. They were surrounded by 50 fighters. 52. I corrected without thinking. Old habits, accuracy mattered. The SEALs smirked behind me, not unkindly. Colonel Maddox stormed forward, his face caught between relief and confusion. "Lieutenant Briggs, report." Jonah didn't hesitate. He just pointed at me. "We didn't escape, sir. We were rescued. By her." Every head turned. Soldiers who'd sat in my chair for trims, who'd told me about their kids, their cars, their wives. They stared as if seeing me for the first time. "Rosa," someone muttered. "The stylist." Maddox's eyes narrowed, flicking over the rifle slung across my back, the soot on my face, the unmistakable bearing of someone who had lived too many nights in combat. "Not just a stylist," he said quietly. They pulled me into a sealed briefing room within the hour. Maddox sat across from me, flanked by a CIA rep flown in on a bird that had landed minutes earlier. The agent carried a thin file, stamped so heavily with black ink that it was more redaction than record. He flipped it open. "Captain Rosa Lane Carter. Special Activities Division. Covert Asset. 83 missions across hostile territory. Expertise in rescues deemed impossible." He looked up. "Presumed inactive for 3 years." I nodded once. "That's correct." "You've been cutting hair here?" Maddox asked, still trying to reconcile it. 3 years, I said. It was the life I chose. Normal. Small talk. Weekends. Not fields of fire. "Then why break cover now?" the agent pressed. "Because 4 men were about to be executed. Men I've known for years. I couldn't sit in my quarters and let them die when I had the skill to stop it." Maddox leaned back, stunned. "You neutralized 52 enemy fighters in under 4 hours. I didn't respond. It wasn't a number I wanted to wear like a medal. The agent closed the file. "By the book, you've committed violations. Unauthorized op on foreign soil. Broken cover. Exposed identity." He paused, then added, "But you also just proved you're still one of the deadliest assets we have." "So," I asked evenly. Are you here to arrest me? He shook his head. Hardly. I'm here to offer you a choice. Return to active duty, or disappear again under a new name. The room went still. Maddox studied me, as though my answer would rewrite his entire understanding of who I was. I looked at the table, at the scratches carved into its metal surface, at my hands that still smelled faintly of cordite. Then I said the only thing that felt true. I want to be ordinary again. The agent frowned. You're certain? After what you just pulled off? Yes, I said. What I did last night is who I had to be, not who I want to be. Maddox exhaled, slow and heavy. Then we'll arrange your relocation. Fort Granite can't stay blind to who you are anymore. The CIA officer slid a card across the table. Only a number on it. Call when you're ready to stop pretending. I pocketed it without looking. 3 hours later, Jonah found me in the corridor. He looked tired but alive, gratitude written plain in his eyes. The guys wanted me to thank you, he said. You saved us. We owe you everything. I shook my head. You don't owe me a thing. Just stay alive. That's enough. He smiled faintly. For the record, you also give the best haircut I've ever had. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. And for a fleeting moment, the world felt almost normal again. The days that followed felt strange, like living inside two skins at once. On the surface, I went back to my station in the little salon at Fort Granite, scissors in hand, cape draped over broad shoulders, asking the same easy questions about families and football. Soldiers came in as if nothing had changed. But I saw it in their eyes. Something had shifted. They knew. Not the details, not the full truth. But enough. Whispers moved through the barracks like smoke through cracks. The stylist had done something impossible. She had brought Bravo Squad back from the dead. Most didn't ask. Some nodded silently as they passed me, a respect that hadn't been there before. Others looked like they wanted to speak, but couldn't find words. That was fine with me. Silence had always been my camouflage. Colonel Maddox submitted my name for a commendation I would never see. The CIA officer left me that card, a tether to a world I'd sworn off. But I kept trimming hair, listening to stories, giving the same smiles as before. Inside, though, I carried something heavier, the knowledge that my mask had cracked, and the woman they'd glimpsed wasn't someone I could keep buried much longer. On my final day, Bravo Squad came into the shop, not for haircuts, but for me. Jonah spoke first. We're going to miss you. I'll miss you too, I said, and I meant it. Mark Dalton leaned against the wall, arms crossed. One question, Rosa. All those times you cut our hair, listening to us talk about missions, were you analyzing us? I couldn't help but grin. Every single time. Force of habit. Luis Ramirez laughed. Figures. We were getting fades from a covert operator and didn't have a clue. Different roles, different strengths, I said. You save lives as a team. I used to save them alone. Your way is better. That's when Aaron Lee stepped forward with a small box. He handed it to me without ceremony. Inside was a trident pin, the emblem of naval special warfare. But etched on the back was one word, shade. I looked up, puzzled. That's what we're calling you, Jonas said. The analysts who reviewed what you did that night couldn't believe one person pulled it off. They said you moved like a shadow. Shade, I repeated softly. The word felt both alien and familiar. I still prefer Rosa, I told them. But I closed my hand around the pin. We said our goodbyes quietly. No grand speeches. Just the kind of words you use when you know they have weight, but don't want to let them crush you. 1 week later, Rosa Lane, the stylist, vanished from Fort Granite. The official story was a family emergency. Most believed it. The SEALs knew better. They never spoke of it again. The mission was locked away under layers of classification. My name disappeared into sealed files. To the world, I was gone. But in whispers, the story lived. The stylist who saved 4 SEALs. The ghost who moved like a shadow. And in the quiet of my room, I tucked the trident into my duffel, knowing it would follow me into whatever life I built next. Because no matter how hard I tried to stay ordinary, the truth was simple. Shade wasn't finished. Not yet. 2 months after I left Fort Granite, a new name appeared in a small Wyoming town. Anna Reed. That was me now. 33, owner of a modest hair salon tucked between a bakery and a hardware store on Main Street. The sign out front was simple, Anna's Cuts. Inside, I painted the walls a soft sage green, set up 2 chairs, and kept the shelves stocked with clippers, combs, and magazines that were already outdated the day they were delivered. To my customers, I was just another woman starting fresh. I gave good cuts, remembered names, and asked about weekends. I laughed at their stories, nodded when they talked about their kids, and handed them the mirror with the same easy smile I'd practiced for years. Nobody here knew what my hands had done. They only saw the gentle rhythm of scissors, not the precision of a rifle trigger. Most days, I let myself believe it too. The trident pin from Bravo Squad stayed hidden in a drawer beneath my station. On quiet nights after closing, I sometimes took it out, running my thumb over the word etched on the back, shade. I told myself I didn't miss that world. Not the blood, not the constant edge of vigilance, not the nights where one wrong decision meant people died. But there were moments, when the doorbell over the shop rang too sharp, or when a man's laugh outside sounded too much like a shout in the dark. Moments where my body moved before my mind caught up. Eyes on exits, hands ready. The rhythm of readiness never left. It was a strange piece. Ordinary, but never quite. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the town in soft amber, a teenage boy came in. Nervous, restless. He asked for a trim, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept flicking to the door. I gave him the cut, chatted about school, kept it light. He didn't say much, but when I handed him the mirror, he finally smiled. Just a little. As he left, I realized something. I didn't need a rifle to save people. Sometimes scissors were enough. Sometimes kindness was the weapon that mattered. And yet, the CIA card was still tucked in the lining of my wallet. One phone call, and I would no longer be Anna Reed the stylist. I never touched the number. But some nights, I caught myself staring at it longer than I wanted to admit. Because deep down I knew, ordinary wasn't permanent. Ordinary was a choice I was making every day. And the world has a way of demanding the extraordinary when you least expect it. For now, I kept cutting hair. For now, I kept the mask. But shade was never gone. Only waiting. It was a Tuesday when the past knocked on my door. The day had been ordinary, the kind of small-town quiet I'd come to appreciate. Kids spilling out of the school across the street. The bell over my shop ringing every so often as neighbors wandered in. By sunset, the chairs were empty, and I was sweeping clippings into the dustpan. That's when the bell rang one more time. He didn't look like a customer. Civilian clothes, but the kind that never wrinkle. Shoes with dust from somewhere harsher than Wyoming. His posture gave him away before his words did. Not military exactly, but someone used to command. Anna Reed, he asked with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. I kept sweeping. That's me. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. Or should I say Captain Rosa Carter? I froze for only a fraction of a second, long enough for him to notice. Then I leaned the broom against the wall and crossed my arms. I don't know what you're talking about. He smiled again. You don't have to. I'm not here to blow your cover. I'm here to deliver a message. From who? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he slipped a card onto the counter. Same plain white as the one the CIA officer had given me at Fort Granite. Only this one had no number. Just a word. Soon. I stared at it, then at him. You people don't quit, do you? We don't waste assets, he said evenly. What you did in those mountains proved you're still one of the best. And when the next fire comes, and it will, you'll be on the list. I kept my voice flat. I'm not going back. He studied me, then gave a small nod. You can believe that if it helps you sleep. But the world has a way of waking people like you up. And with that, he turned and left, the bell jingling softly as if he'd only come for a haircut. I stood there long after he was gone, staring at the card. The trident pin in my drawer felt heavier that night. I pulled it out, set it beside the card, and just looked at them both. The past and the future, sitting there on my counter while the present threatened to disappear between them. For the first time since Wyoming, I locked the shop doors early, sat in the dark, listening to the creak of the building and the whisper of my own pulse. I wanted to believe I could stay ordinary forever. But ordinary didn't knock on your door with cards like that. Extraordinary was coming, whether I wanted it or not. The card sat on my counter for 3 days. Soon. Just one word, but it carried more weight than the rifles I'd once hauled across mountain ranges. I tried to bury myself in the rhythm of the salon. Snip, trim, small talk, repeat. But my mind wandered. Every time the bell rang, I expected the man to return. Every time a stranger lingered too long outside the window, my stomach tightened. Then the town itself cracked my quiet. It was Friday evening when the shouting started. I was closing up shop, turning the blinds when I saw the commotion across the street at the gas station. A pickup truck sat crooked at the pump, 3 men spilling out, loud and sloppy. Drunk. Local troublemakers, the kind the sheriff usually dealt with before things got ugly. But this time was different. They weren't just loud. They had a girl cornered against the wall, barely 18, still in her high school jacket, hands up as they taunted her. I felt the old instincts surge before I could stop them. The angle of their bodies, the distance to the girl, the way one man kept shifting his jacket like something heavier than fists hid beneath it. I told myself it wasn't my fight. I was Anna Reed, hairdresser, not Rosa Carter, not Shade. Then the tallest one shoved her, hard enough that her head hit the wall. And just like that, the mask cracked. I crossed the street without thinking, my steps measured, my voice steady. That's enough. They turned, bleary-eyed, sizing me up. One sneered. Keep walking, lady. Not your business. I stopped 10 feet away, the distance where words can still matter, but movement already counts. My eyes swept exits, objects I could use, lines of attack. It was muscle memory, not thought. She's going home, I said calmly. You're done here. The leader laughed and stepped forward. Or what? You'll cut us with scissors? I let him get close. Too close. Then I moved. His wrist twisted before he knew it, his body hitting the pavement with a crack that sobered his friends instantly. The second lunged, sloppy, and I redirected his momentum into the side of the truck. The third froze, halfway between bravado and retreat. I held his gaze, calm and cold. Pick him up. Leave. Now. They didn't argue. When it was over, the girl was trembling, wide-eyed. How did you? Doesn't matter. I cut in gently. You're safe. Go home. She ran. I walked back to my shop, hands steady even though my heart was hammering. I locked the door and leaned against it, staring at the card still on the counter. Soon, the message wasn't about the CIA. It wasn't about missions or orders. It was about me. No matter how far I ran, Shade lived under my skin. And sometimes, she slipped out before I could stop her. I sat in the dark of my salon, staring at the card and the trident pin beside it. Soon, I whispered, as if saying the word could bend time itself. I didn't know what was coming, but Shade never truly slept. And neither did I. The next morning, I opened the salon doors as usual, smiling at neighbors, listening to their stories, trimming hair, catching the faintest hints in their eyes that they sensed something more. And yet, my heart skipped a beat every time the bell above the door rang. A few days later, he returned, the same man with the plain white card, now carrying the certainty of someone who knew what was at stake. I met his gaze, and in that instant, the unspoken understanding passed between us. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. It's time, he said. I inhaled deeply, letting the calm of years of training settle over me. Shade was alive, lurking beneath the surface, ready. But this time, I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding behind scissors or smiles. I stood, squared my shoulders, and let the weight of my other life fall into place. Then let's not waste it, I said. And just like that, the ordinary life I'd carved out, so carefully, so gently, shifted. The stylist was still here, but Shade had returned. Waiting wasn't an option anymore. Extraordinary had come knocking, and this time, I would answer. I tucked the trident pin into my pocket, slipped the card into my wallet, and stepped out into the quiet Wyoming morning. Somewhere in the distance, a world that needed saving waited, and I was ready. Because Shade was never gone. She had only been waiting for the right moment. And that moment had finally arrived. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.